Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Jaws. Because why not? At the end of the day, it's technically where I'm at. It's winter time. But I'm like, you know what? Like, Jaws is good all around, right? Like, year round, everybody just wants to eventually go on and remember the sunny beaches and bathing suit season and so on and so forth, while they're probably in their houses just freaking just freezing it up, so to speak, because it's winter where I'm at, because I, of course, live in a northern state where it's more cold than anything else, which is great, because freaking I'm not a person that enjoys the heat. So, I just don't. So, we go on into this film, and the immediate thing that everybody's to always think of, it's like, well, hey, like, this made a lot of people just step back when they're thinking about going into the waters. Really, we just have it where, like, this movie was to terrify a generation of people, and really that's the one thing that Steven Spielberg was like, yeah, I did. I got him. I wanted to scare the crap out of a number of people, and I accomplished that. So, really, I enjoy this film. I enjoy it. Really, every time you are to see it on TV, eventually you'll stop what you're doing and watch a bit of it. Maybe not the whole thing, because it is kind of a long, stretched out thing, because you kind of have to wait for the massive, gigantic shark to come in this film. And, like, there's kind of a build-up of this movie. Really haven't seen, I don't remember seeing any much of, like, I've seen probably a lot of the sequels, especially the Michael Caine Jaws movie. I've seen that weirdly. Like, I think weirdly I also can enjoy that movie. But there's also, like, the part of me that is to actually like the Dennis Quaid Jaws too, where you end up having, like, this big massive shark, and it's kind of like the Meg in a way, or yeah, the Meg, where you end up having this massive shark, and these people are desperately realizing that they're in a thing for this shark to go after, uh, teasing at it and whatever. It's so it because they make an underground observatory thing for people to go into, and what a mistake that was. So we go on. So for this film, it's of course a very enjoyable piece. We really get some kind of technical things about sharks also, where we get informed about tiger sharks and that they're man eaters and so on and so forth. But we also get to find out about like certain kind of stories about the Indianapolis and them uh, going through and having 1,000 men come out of the water, and a couple hundred less come out of the water, and so on and so forth. Hearing that story and so on and so forth. There is a few scenes here and there that I think end up getting taken from this. Of course, we have the one scene where Brody is to mention, like, you have a bad hat, Harry. I guess has something to do with Bryan Singer, how he kind of took that and kind of made him a logo after that. When you would see, like, a bunch of, like, certain shows or certain things that eventually would, like, you have a bad hat, Harry, and you have that weird scene at the end of a show. Evidently, that has some tying into Bryan Singer, I guess. We go on, and we, of course, have the Scar scene, that of course at some point is probably taken from a number of things. Like look at I think Loaded Weapon, the Emilio Estevez movie, where they're going through and they're like, hey, look at my scar, oh look at this, oh so on and so forth. um, but yeah, so let's go into it. Let's just go into Jaws. Let's not bide so much time here. The one thing that I think is to be so interesting about this movie, that I always want to compare Jaws to like Camp Crystal Lake from Friday the 13th. I always want to look at the Amityville Islands beach and compare it, because really when looking at it, we have these people that still have these great white sharks, and they're still wanting to desperately keep these beaches open because a summer beach equals summer money. And but we turn around and we end up having Camp Crystal Lake, who's like, you know what, I don't think that Jason Voorhees is going to come back this year. Like, I think we can just kind of keep it open. I think it'll be fine. I think it'll all work out. Fuck! God dang it, another god dang year where this guy is just coming on down, murdering a bunch of people. So, really that's what it kind of comes down to, is just every single time these people are to think that they can make money off of something, they turn around and they realize how much of a massive loss it's just going to be, and how people are going to go and sue Happy and whatever. So let's go out of our way to say that we've seen this movie, because it's about time for us to double five this bad boy up and go into spoilers about this film. I think the one thing that we compare to the movie to the book is supposedly that Hopper was supposed to have an affair with Brody's wife, I guess, in the book, is what I'm told. I don't know if there's anything else that is different from the book to the movie, but that's what I would normally hear about that whole thing. Oddly. So let's go out of our way to say it's about that time. Let's go into that double five, because otherwise, time to spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time we get to spoil this movie. So let's go into it. Let's go into the spoilers of this one. So in the very beginning of this film, and where could you go out of your way to say that you've seen this film, just in case you want to watch again? Well, I would suggest going into Google searches and searching the word letter C movies. It's an app that you can, in fact, download and be able to watch this film. Some people might have this movie in their collection, so why bother me suggesting anything for you to go and go out of your way to find if you already have this movie in your collection. More likely, there's probably a bunch of apps you can probably rent this from, because it's freaking Jaws. Because there's not a convenient app for you to go out of your way to say that you've seen this movie. But everybody has probably heard of Jaws at this point. Really, you could also go on to a Google search to Fox HD Movies, and the logo will say so, but the title will say something different. It'll say Play 1080p HD, whatever, blah, 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 blah. That's all, folks. If you download the combination of both of those apps, you should be able to basically be able to see anything that you want at that point. Really, you could go on to also Google Play Store an app called TV Crush and download that one also. That every once in a while there'll be a random thing that isn't on those other two apps that might be on TV Crush. It's surprising. So, but either way, you could probably go and search movie apps and just probably go and randomly go in any one of those. They'll probably have Jaws somewhere, I'm assuming, because it's a big, massive film that everybody knows about. So without a doubt, let's go into spoilers. So the very nitty-gritty beginning of this is, of course, to have a bunch of people that are probably smoking it up or drinking it up at a campfire party. So we, of course, have this girl called Christine, or she's called Christy. She goes on into the waters, skinny dipping, of course, because why wouldn't you in a horror film? Check the very beginning of Freddy vs. Jason, another girl skinny dipping to start out a film where she ends up dead. and I'm sure there's probably another massive number of other people at some point that had gone skinny dipping and then regretted it because they die. So we end up having this long blonde haired kid that I don't quite know the name of because I couldn't find it in IMDb, who is to go on and desperately try to get his clothes off, but I think he's so drunk or so high that he otherwise just falls over and passes out because he can't walk or do it really much of anything. So he just collapses off to the side of the beach like a lazy motherfucker. So we end up having Christy, who's enjoying the water a little bit too much because there's a shark on the way. So we end up having Jaws going and grabbing at this one and kind of pulling her through the waters. And so now she's kind of thrashing through the waters. Even at some point, the Jaws shark is to let this girl just take a break so that way she can hold on to this kind of buoy-like thing. I'm not really good with boat terms, so forgive me if I mess something up here. So, but we go on and we have this girl eventually dragged under the water after this Jaws-like character is like, where's that woman at? Oh yeah, let me go and get some more of that. And dunk her under the water and murder her. So we then, of course, go on to have both Brody and Ellen transitioning here the very next morning, who are to go on and make fun of the accents that are, of course, to be on this island, because, of course, I guess they are originally from New York, and they're just coming here to be the acting sheriff for a brief amount of time. And so, because they had bought, that's not a word, they had bought this house in the fall, but now they're here in the summer, and they're realizing how the sun is coming from the window. So we go on and make fun of these accents, having it much more the ka and the yard and the blah blah blah. Anyways, pushing on. So we have, of course, Brody looking out the window, finding where his kid's at, playing outside. So we go on and, of course, have Brody getting ready for work. And so evidently he is to be getting called by his partner, his deputy, which, of course, is to be Hendrix, possibly. And so we end up having Brody going to work to eventually have this this guy who is to, of course, not be a local islander. I think he is also from New York, who is to have found or has reported this girl missing. So we end up having Hendrix, who is to be whistling away where exactly this girl is, and then he is to go off to the side and just kind of play with the sand as Brody is to spot this girl and realize that there is not much left of her left. So we go on and we really have here, we have Brody going on and filling out papers to say that this is a shark attack, while both Hendrix and the blonde-haired witness is to be still in a stage of shock, where I guess one guy is to be drinking some kind of water with some kind of medication kerplunked into it. So we go on and we have Brody, who, of course, is to be typewritering this out. And all of a sudden we end up having a woman coming in mentioning about a fire chief wanting to talk about like the whole 4th of July celebration, kind of what their plans are, like meaning like what are they going to do to kind of up the ante for safety protocols and stuff like that via 4th of July. And so Brody is to have a number, like we have like kind of one guy complaining about something, and so Brody is to go on and mention to file some reports somewhere, and then he goes off to eventually go on and try to find that there is a whole swim team that is going and practicing over by the waters, where Brody is trying to, of course, get those kids to come back so that way they don't get shark attacked, so to speak. So we now have the mayor, who is Vaughn, who is with the medical examiner, and so they're trying to prevent Brody from calling this a shark attack to try to come up with some other kind of answers here. And I'm sure maybe Vaughn is kind of tipping some money to the medical examiner to just say, like, yeah, this is not a shark attack. Say something else. That it's quite possibly a boat propeller or some other kind of other means of some kind of accident instead of it actually being a shark attack. Where we end up finding Hooper is to come in later to go in and correct this and say, no, this is a shark attack. This is not from a boat. Medical examiner, where is Miss Kittner when we need her? To just freaking pelt somebody one. Let's go into it. So we, of course, have Vaughn desperately trying to convince Brody that this isn't a shark attack, because he's like, hey, man, like, we got to keep these beaches open. Like, and if anything, even when there is much more of a shark attack, like, Vaughn is just like, well, we're going to only keep the beaches closed for 24 hours. And we have one person in the background when they're doing this whole, like, city council meeting. They're like, oh my God, 24 hours is like it being closed for 3 weeks. Oh my God. Whatever. You can hear that in the background. So we go on and we have Vaughn, Mayor Vaughn, who's convincing Brody here to keep the beaches open. And so Brody goes along with it. So we now, of course, have Brody, who is to kind of watch the beaches, kind of watch as people are to play in the water. And so, of course, we have Brody eventually seeing what he's possibly think is a shark, but actually it's Harry with his awful hat. So we end up having Brody getting approached at the beach with a number of people complaining about things. One guy complaining about his cat problem, weirdly. So we have at one point Ellen asking the people of the town how soon is it going to be before she ends up becoming an islander. And they're going to tell her that she never will be because she wasn't born here. So we go on and we have Brody just kind of watching the waters. And so it seems that of all the people that are kind of actually splashing around here, the shark is to go after one thing and one thing only, a kid called Kittner. That, of course, is to be a kid that is to be on this little raft of a thing. And I'm like, okay, out of all the people to go after, like, easy access food, you're going to stubbornly go after something that you can't quite get at all that quickly. Does anybody realize how stupid that is? That's just my thought about things. So we go on, and now they're posting everywhere that there's a $3,000 reward for this shark being caught. So now we end up getting everybody and the brother all of a sudden wanting to become a fisherman at this second, even though they might be ill-experienced. They don't give a shit. They just want to go and find this shark. They just want to go and get that 3,000, because they're like, man, like, how can we just skimmingly get by and go off and get a massive payout for doing no work here? We end up having these two guys who just go and put a chain onto a dock and chuck this big massive roast out, this dinner roast, and it ends up being that Jaws actually does go and take and eat this roast, but then goes and grabs the dock and breaks it off of this dock. And so we now end up having Johnny, who falls into the water. And so now we have the guy yelling for Johnny to get back onto the dock so that way he won't get eaten by the shark. But anyways, let's push on here. So we have this town council meeting, whatever thing, where of course we end up seeing Quint here. Quint, of course, is to be the 1,000 guys go into the water, 3,000 guys get out of the water. It sucks, right? So we have the guy who's like, who loves talking about, who loves singing that song about women from Spain. Sure, that guy, the guy. So let's get into it. So we of course go on here and have this town meeting where we're desperately having the mayor wanting, of course, this beach only closed for 24 hours for them to be able to go and take down this shark. And so Brody didn't agree to that, but that's what the mayor is saying, because it seems that Brody was to go on and have a bunch of signs being made that this beach is going to be closed. He ends up going to some hardware store to go and get these signs for Hendrix to do, or he pushes this off to somebody else. But so we end up having Vaughn, who's like, well, like, F those signs. Like, nah. So we end up having Mayor Vaughn, who's kind of going through, and we have this kind of unsavory character that's asking, it's like, well, hey, is that $3,000 payout going to be in check or cash? Ha 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 ha. What an awful joke. We have one woman in the very front there who is going on and mentioning that she thinks that her opinion is to be valid here. Like, we just have a lot of people that are just kind of saying things about, like, just nonsensical things. But, like, I guess they're, like, people are catching what people are saying here, and they're using it in the film. So we end up going on because everybody's just going on and on about this payday. And so Quint is to go in and through the chalkboard. And so now Quint is to go on and tell everybody, it's like, well, hey, like, I value my life more than catching the shark. So if anything, I'll have you give me $3,000 to find it and $10,000 to kill it and bring it back, so to speak. So I'm wondering who exactly got the $10,000 at the end of this. Brody? Do you think Brody got $10,000? No, probably not. It's like, oh, we were supposed to have this $10,000 go to the guy who's dead, so you didn't get that reward, I'm sure. I'm kind of tempted to watch the sequel to just see if they end up talking about the ward and how probably nobody got it. I'm tempted because I remember in Ghostbusters 2 they end up talking about getting sued by every town high-rise in state of New York for that whole Stay Puft Marshmallow incident, because I guess that ended up being their problem, their thing. My bad. There was a Amber Alert going on here for some reason. So, let me pause here for a second. All right. The whole Amber Alert thing was like, I'll just pause here and whatever. So we go on and we have Brody, who's doing his due diligence by going on and reading up about sharks. And so all of a sudden he has to realize that his son is to be technically on this dock, but in the water in this boat. And we, of course, have Brody, who is viciously trying to get his son off of this boat because he doesn't want him in the water right now because of this shark attack. So we end up having Ellen shouting out to their son to get out of the water because of this picture of this shark going and chomping through this boat, trying to get to this one person. So we go on here and we now have, of course, everybody in the Brother who is to have a boat is all of a sudden becoming a shark hunter. And so we end up having Hooper come on to be Brody's shark expert. So we go on here and we have Hooper, who's looking at all these guys in these boats, and he's realizing how many people are going to die by what they're trying to do or accomplish here. So we have Hooper that goes and is desperately trying to figure out where is Sheriff Brody. And Brody, of course, is like, well, I'm Sheriff Brody. It's like, hey, like, you must be my shark expert. Great, because, like, we're going to need you to figure out what the heck is going on here. So we, of course, transition to having somebody catch a shark, but not the shark. Because somebody is to go on and catch a tiger shark, and so we have like a bunch of people that are kind of news reporters and whatever, desperately trying to get to this story. So they end up finding some guys that is to find a shark that is a tiger shark. And so this shark, I guess, is rare for these waters and so on and so forth, because I guess he's from southern waters, I guess, is what they say in this movie. Off the some gulf somewhere, from what I can all remember. So we, of course, have everybody going on and doing this big, massive picture saying that they have possibly caught the shark, but it's very premature because Hooper is to come in and say, no, this isn't it. And so we now have the mayor coming in and saying, well, like, you guys aren't going to cut this shark open right now because I don't want this Kittner kid spilling out right in front of all these people. So we go on and we have Mrs. Kittner, who I guess had gone on to have a funeral for her son. And so she goes and finds Sheriff Brody and slaps him in the face. I'm like, yeah, do it again. Just purr, 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 purr. Just slap the out of him horrifically. So we go on here and we, of course, have Miss Kittner, who is going on and telling Sheriff Brody that Brody was to have before realized that this beach was unsafe, and she had or they had gone on and let this beach be open anyways, and that, of course, the death of her son is on Brody's hands. So we end up having Miss Kittner go on and just be like, well, hey, it's not your fault. And so it's like, Brody's like, yeah, it is. It is. So we end up going on and having Brody having supposedly dinner. Not quite sure if he actually ate it or not, because Hooper is coming in to scoop that food from underneath his shoulders or underneath his arms that are just kind of like, whichever. Anyways, so Brody is to go on and just kind of like putting his hands and doing things with his hands. His son all of a sudden is mimicking exactly what he's doing, and so we now have Brody who's kind of like, and he's like, you know what, son, come over here, give me a kiss, because I need it. So we have his kid run off to go and play with whatever. So Brody is to go on and see Hopper come in with a thing of red and white wine, because he's not sure what exactly they were to be feasting on here, so he's not sure what right wine to bring here. Hopper is mentioning that he's going on to some event with all these shark experts the very next day, but weirdly he never goes there. He never goes off to this thing that he's mentioning here, because obviously he's still here through the rest of this film. But he mentions that he's going off for supposedly 18 months to go with these people, and he never actually does, because that doesn't make sense. Why does he must have canceled his plans while he's mentioning that really just Brody here is going to be the only sane person left on this island. So we end up now having Brody telling Hopper here that he's going to get one more drink in him, and they're going to go and cut that shark open. And Hooper is just like, well, are you sure that we're going to be able to do that? And, of course, Brody is like, dude, I'm the sheriff, I could do anything. So they go on and they cut open this shark, and they end up finding a Louisiana plate, as well as quite a bit of fish here. So, like I want to say that his name is Hopper, but I keep calling him Hooper for some reason. Anyways, so we have Hopper. I'll just call him the Hopper for the rest of the time here, even though it's probably ill pronounced for whatever reason. So we of course have them realize that in this digestive system, this shark doesn't have a body in it, so it's not the right shark. So we then go on and we have Hopper with his big, lavish, expensive boat that he is to have a bunch of different gadgets on, which he didn't go to the shore with that boat. He had some smaller boat, and I guess, like, didn't quite understand that. Like, why is it that Hopper now had a smaller boat, but then all of a sudden he has this big, massive boat for some odd reason? Because we end up having, of course, Brody, who's kind of hesitant about going on this boat because he's like, I'm not drunk enough to go on this boat. And Hopper saying, like, well, you're going to get drunk enough. So they, of course, go on to this boat. And so we go on and on and on about how really Hopper is just this big, rich guy that he goes on and has, like, people have him go and find sharks and stuff like that, and he's just made a killing off of it because I guess not only is he rich, but I guess his family's rich, yada yada yada. So we end up having both these people go and find Ben Gardner's boat. I almost said Ben Parker at one point because I always get, like, the names confused for whatever reason. So they end up going on and finding Ben Gardner's boat, and so we, of course, have them want to just haul this boat in, and we actually just have Hopper here just wanting to say, like, well, wait a minute, let me go and check a part of the boat, and then I'll come back and we'll haul this boat away. So while he goes on and does that, he ends up seeing a hole in the boat that, of course, is to have a big, massive tooth, which is to say great white. Sadly enough, we continue to have Hopper here consistently drop things into the water consistently because he ends up not only dropping the tooth, but he ends up dropping the one thing that is to kill the shark later on in the film. So Hopper, of course, is a little bit delayed on the whole scare department because he is to be looking at this face, then all of a sudden it's realized what it is, and then he ends up getting scared, and then he runs off. Terrified, of course, beyond belief. So we now have, of course, both Brody and Hopper here convincing Vaughn that, hey man, like, this is a great white, this is what attacked your people. Of course, we have Hopper mentioning that he was to have a great white tooth, and Vaughn is like, well, where's the evidence? Whoops. Butterfingers. So really the only thing that Vaughn is concerned about is the vandalism or the graffiti that is going on upon the Amity Island sign, who we end up seeing Brody drive into in the very beginning of this film. We end up seeing it again, different because all of a sudden there is to be a shark now showcasing, and a woman screaming, help, shark, with a talk bubble now. So all Vaughn gives about is finding the people that vandalized this sign and arrest them, because that's all that really matters. We end up having Hopper saying how this sign is to actually be very a good representation of what's really going on here, and that's actually to scale. So we then go on here and, of course, have the everybody just coming in from out of town, desperately wanting to go into the beach. So everybody is to go on and just be kind of just standing on the beach part, not wanting to go into the water. We end up having Mayor Vaughn, who eventually is to want people to go into the water, and so we end up having Mr. Posner go into the water. Um, After Mr. Posner has mentioned that he is like, oh well, I want to work on my tan, but like Mayor Posner is just telling him to go out there. So we start to have a bunch of people go into the water. Eventually, we have Brody who is talking to his son Mike, telling him to go off to the pond instead of going on to the actual beach, to go with their boat and do whatever they want, but go off there. So we, of course, have Brody who is to seemingly spot that there is another shark here, but this time around it's two kids playing around with a cardboard fin. We end up having a bunch of people all like crazily go out of the way to want to shoot up this shark, but realize it's some kids playing around. Where now we have it to where the real shark is actually in the pond, where of course Mike is to eventually have his boat tipped over, and a guy who's in a sailboat is going to get his boat tipped over and eaten. Uh, so we go on and we have Mike who is dragged out of the water and he is in shock. So Mike is to get out of the hospital with a mild shock now. We end up having, of course, both the mayor and both Brody in this hospital where Mike was, and so we end up having Vaughn, who's kind of also a little bit kind of shaken about this because technically his family was also by that beach, also in that water. So Brody is convincing, of course, Vaughn here to sign this paper telling Brody to go on and have Quint go and hunt down this shark, pay him whatever he wants. And so we, of course, now have Brody and Hopper going to see, of course, Quint here to, like, say, hey, like, this is all that we're going to do. You can go and get any number of meals and so on and so forth, anything that you want, blah, blah, blah. So we now have really, Quint doesn't want to really work with anybody. He doesn't want any first mates, any whatever. And so we of course have Hopper that's wanting to go with Quint, and so Quint of course wants to see how qualified this guy is by tying this knot. So we go on here and have Quint tie this knot and ask him about all these things. So we go on here and we of course have it where it seems that they're to get this boat ready, the Orca that we see here in this visual. So they end up getting this boat ready and get all the equipment on it, and so we accidentally have to foreshadow somewhere in here that Brody is going to accidentally pull a rope to almost pull out these tanks, and we end up having, of course, Hopper mention that these tanks can blow up if you mess with them the wrong way. So, foreshadowing for what's going to happen towards the end of this film if we don't foreshadow this enough in this movie via picture from a shark that's eating a tank at some point. So, we go on here and really we end up having like this fishing line being set up, and we eventually have it where it seems that Quint here is to get a nibble, and so Quint is to kind of reel back on this rod while he kind of sets it up to just kind of like take it back. So we end up finding out that this piano rod is of course to get broken, and so Quint is now telling Hopper that he doesn't know because like for this shark to go and break piano wire, that seems to be a very difficult thing to break here. So we go on and eventually have it where we have Brody consistently tossing like fish food here, like we see in this movie. So we eventually get Brody, who's starting to get really ticked by having to consistently throw slop. And he, of course, is going on and kind of covering his mouth at certain points, and because he's just sick of the smell of dead fish and so on and so forth. So as Brody is to chuck the chum, the whatever, all of a sudden the Jaws shark is to finally arrive in this film, and we actually see it really well here. And we have Brody, who is so taken back by the shark now being in this spot. We have Brody backing up and telling both Quint and possibly Hopper from wherever he is that they're going to need a bigger boat, which is the big, massive quote of this film that gets quoted so often, much more so than anything else. We're going to need a bigger boat. Doesn't really happen all that often that people are to quote that, but they'll probably randomly quote it anyways because they have nothing better to do. But just to say that as a quote, whichever. So we of course end up having the like this one bizarre sequence that they're going and trying to shoot a number of barrels to slow down the shark, as we are to technically see here, so that way this shark doesn't consistently go further and further deep down into the waters. So they end up wasting so much time doing these barrels one by one to see if this shark is going to easily go and consistently dunk these barrels. It doesn't really seem between all this time that they end up coming up with another plan or a different plan or what is going to be really their next plan. Just fire another barrel at them. Just consistently fire another barrel. Because there isn't much of a with plan. There's also a part in this movie where we weirdly have it, where all of a sudden Brody is talking and he's to be cut off because there's this weird goofy transition because no one, I guess, wanted to hear what Brody had to really say here. What a weird director's cut of that whole scene. Maybe time? Like, I don't get it. Maybe, like, Steven had to just cut that scene for time. But he wanted it exactly at 2 hours and 10 minutes, so he just weirdly had to cut something there that made no sense. So even for Steven Spielberg, I guess there's certain times when you end up having a person talking about something but gets weirdly cut off for whatever reason. So we go on here and we have the guys who I guess are good enough with all their barrels that they have shot into this shark at one point with their harpoon gun and whichever to go on and just tell stories. We have, of course, Quint going and talking about the Indianapolis, how they had gone on to try to bomb some people, and the Japanese subs had decided to send two missiles their way and take down their ship. And so all of a sudden we have about 1,000 people who are to supposedly be what is it? Life preserved, whatever, the little floaty things. And we have Quint mentioning that he's never going to wear one of those ever again. So we go on and we have Quint going and saying that all these guys were kind of huddled together, just kind of waiting for a shark to come, so that way they can go and smack this shark and so on and so forth. We had Quint, who I guess is to wake up one day thinking that his friend is just kind of sleeping, but all of a sudden we end up finding out that actually his friend is dead. That his friend is like got chomped up by some shark, and luckily it wasn't him for that day. So after that story, we end up having them all of a sudden swapping Scar stories about a number of things that ended up happening to them. We have Hopper mentioning some story about some eel, and so on and so forth. They start swapping so many other stories. We have at one point Hopper who kind of pulls down his shirt and is to say that his one scar is from a girl that dumped him. Man, was that hilarious. So we go on, and after that, again, if we haven't heard of the Spanish Ladies song enough in this movie, we have to hear it once again here. But then all of a sudden we transition to have Hopper and sing that song about show me the way to go home. Boom, 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 tired and want to go to bed. Took about a drink about an hour ago and went right through my head. Boom, boom, boom. While they go on and they're starting to sing this song, all of a sudden the shark is to smack into the boat. And now we end up having it to where these guys are to go on and try to put more barrels into this shark, so to speak. So after that, it's just seemed to fail us here, where they go on and they try to latch the barrels onto the back of the ship, and they're getting pulled and rocked and backed and forth and whatever. There's this one point where we end up having Hopper who ends up getting uh, like caught in the ropes, and he's like, ugh! And like we have Hopper desperately trying to help, or we have Brody desperately helping Hopper here try to get out of these ropes, and I'm like, oh my god, that is gonna like hurt like a mother. So, but we go on and have both of the end kind of tie things at the end of this boat eventually break off, and because they were trying to desperately get this shark to follow them into shallower water so they can go after it then. So everything fails. Eventually, the engine blows up, and because of course, Quint is pushing it too hard. We have one point where Brody is to whip out his gun and fire some shots at the shark, but what good does that really do? It's a freaking shark. Uh, so he doesn't shoot it in the eye, of course. Doesn't shoot the shark in the eye. Sucks, right? So we go on and they're all out of plans and they're going to of course have this boat sinking soon. And so really what I guess Quint's plan was to try to get this shark in the most shallowest water and then attack him from that. Like kind of poke at him numerous times from that. Because it doesn't really seem like they have any much of sound plan besides that. They don't have dynamite on the ship. They don't have anything. We have at one point where, of course, Brody is desperately calling Mayday, and Quint is to break the radio, and Brody is now viciously upset with Quint for doing that. So, the big master plan that, of course, Quint is to now have is to be basically Hopper's plan to go on and be in this cage and just stab at this thing with a ejection of poison to kill this shark that way. So we of course end up having Hopper going into this thing called the cage, and so this guy is telling him like, hey, like, you guys up here try to do something so that way like he doesn't go after me quite as easily. What do these people do? Jack crap nothing. They're just like, hey, hopefully he'll just not die. And if he does, like, hopefully he stabs him with that stick. But we just have Hopper with his butterfingers who drops his lethal dose of stuff that he is to stab into this shark while the shark is trying to get into the cage with him. You know, just like maybe he wants a selfie. He's trying to get the right angle. He's like, "Hey man, like come on, let's get this right. Come on." I want to make sure that like I'm not like totally in the picture, but like come on, like you got to be like meet me halfway. So we end up having, of course, Dreyfuss's character Hopper here desperately getting out of the cage, swimming away, avoiding the shark, and now plan whatever the heck number of letter of whatever that this plan is has failed. So now we just go on and just have this shark because this boat is sinking anyways. This shark is just like, you know what? I'm just gonna continue to, as his boat is sinking, like smash into it and just go after some folks because I'm bored. So we end up having Jaws, who is to jump on the very back of this boat that we kind of see here, and we end up having now both Quint and Brody, who are desperately trying to hold on to this ship, and Quint, sadly, of course, is to fall down into the mouth of this shark, And so we of course have Quint, who's trying to like use his feet to try to get out of the mouth of the shark, but eventually he falls in there anyways. So we end up having the shark nibble at him as Quint is desperately trying to stab into this shark, but he's gonna die. Sadly, we have Quint who's spewing all this blood out of his mouth. He's dying. So we of course now have Quint who is dead here, and so Brody is to now have to come up with a master plan of just whatever's left in this boat. He's gonna just try to like be in the inside of it, because we end up finding out that Brody is to have a fear of water, and I guess rightfully so now because of this movie. None of it is really to be said why he has a fear of water, but he just does. And so we end up having Hopper at some point making a joke of like, well, like you're a guy who fears the water and you're on an island. And Brody makes the comeback of like, well, it's only an island if you think of it that way. Like, it's only surrounded by water if you think of that. So we also have to have the mayor at some point telling us that enmity is to, of course, mean friendship. Hopefully it also means murder, because there's going to be a lot of just going on with sharks in the near future here. So we, of course, have Brody, who is to only have one thing to defend himself, and that, of course, is a big, massive tank here that really Hopper was to say, it's like, well, this could explode, so like just shove it in a shark's mouth, right? Just do that. So we of course have Brody who shoves this tank into the shark's mouth, and then the shark ends up leaving because it's like, I'm gonna chomp on this tank for a little bit. I'll be back. So we now have Brody who is going on and finding this rifle and is fighting this one stabbing utensil or spear, stick thing. Let's go further. So Brody is to go and find this one stretch of thing for him to make his last stand on, because this boat is kind of going under for the most point. So we have the shark, of course, coming at him weirdly. He could have just left, because there's really very few people left here. So we now have the shark vengefully coming after Brody, weirdly, oddly. I don't know why. So we, of course, have Brody who's lining up the shot, and he's like, show me that smile, motherfucker. As he shoots him with the tank, the shark blows up. And so now we have Brody who's just like, blah, I'm so freaking exhausted. This movie has been filming for X amount of time. I'm freaking tired now. So Hopper ends up coming back and like, hey, like, the shark must be dead, because I'm not. So Hopper goes and finds Brody, and Hopper's telling Brody, it's like, why don't you quit? He's like, I can't. So we go on and we have both of them with some barrels left going and deciding to kick their way to shore. And we, of course, have Brody asking Hopper what day it is, because the tide seems to be with them. So we go on and we have these guys making their way back home, I guess, to just be $10,000 richer, right? So really, that's just the end of this movie, and I think that's all that I have left to say, because at the end of the day, I think that's it. So we'll see eventually if people are interested in Jaws for me to want to go and cover sequels or other shark films, because I'm sure there's big, massive followings for certain other shark films like Deep Blue Sea or any number of other things that I've probably mentioned at this point, or probably at some point didn't mention. Because who knows? I don't remember. It's a fog, because there's so much that I have to remember at some point. Into the Blue. Anybody want to see a review about Into the Blue? I don't know why, but it's a Paul Walker film, so maybe that could be a justifiable reason. But yeah, I've seen quite a few shark films, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent, like Sharktopus or Sharktopus. I don't know why that exists, but evidently it was a popular thing on sci-fi for whatever reason. As I tend to, whenever I go and do a shark film of some kind, I end up going on and telling all the hugely popular movies that weirdly came out of a shark film, like a ghost shark and whichever. But anyways, I'm gonna go out of my way to get out of here, five-headed shark, or three-headed shark. Why do these exist? Anyways, I'm gonna go out of my way to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody. Bye.